So I've been getting a lot of questions in my comments about immigrating to Paraguay and residency and kind of what that looks like. Now, I personally don't feel adequate to answer that because my situation is unique, but I did reach out to Plan B Paraguay and they were kind enough to offer an interview. So I've got Paul on today, who is the co-owner, and thank you so much, Paul, for offering to do this.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. All right, so first question, we'll get right into it, is how long has Plan B Paraguay been in business and in what languages can you serve customers? Because I know that's a big thing when people want to immigrate. They don't very often speak the language.
Yeah, sure. So myself and my business partner and our lawyer, we've been helping people for many years, but officially Plan B Paraguay started just over a year ago.
Okay.
And from that, in regards to the languages we speak, I mean, you'll notice all our content's in English. So obviously we more focus on English speaking countries, you know, the US, UK, Australia, New Zealand, English speaking Europeans. However, we've helped people from all over the world.
Okay. Awesome. From what I've seen on social media platforms, various ones, is there's a lot of Germans immigrating from Germany to Hohenau, Paraguay. Now, from your experience, where do most of the people generally settle when they get here?
You know, it really depends on the demographic, right? So I think Paraguay offers different things to different people. So what I tend to notice is perhaps people maybe a little bit younger, perhaps they're single, they tend to more stay in Asuncion because they want, you know, maybe more of the lifestyle with restaurants and going out and more sort of modern conveniences and that sort of thing. Whereas maybe people who are older or who have families or want more of a simpler type of lifestyle, they tend to more want to live in rural areas like the one you said.
Yeah. Okay. Paraguay really offers a whole lot of variety in that aspect.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are the different immigration options? Because I have seen different ones and they all work a little bit different. Can you go through those a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's kind of two main ones, but there's really sort of only one that everyone does. So the one that we recommend to basically 99% of our clients is to first get the temporary residency. So this is quite a simple process. First, you get a temporary residency, which lasts for 2 years. And then after that, you convert to a permanent residency, which when you have that, you only have to renew it every 10 years. This is by far the simplest and fastest process to, you know, put down roots and have a residency in Paraguay. There's a second option called the SUASE program, and this is a business investment program for Paraguay. It really has one benefit. The benefit of the SUASE program is you can have the permanent residency immediately. So you don't have that 2-year temporary residency step. However, it comes with a lot more requirements you have to fulfill. The first is that you have to invest the equivalent of US $70,000 in Paraguay. Now, this investment can take place over 10 years. So you don't have to do it all at once, but you will also have to, you know, prove that you're making this investment, and you have to do sort of all the paperwork and administration to go through that as well. So for the majority of people, the minor inconvenience of having the 2-year temporary residency first isn't as much as the inconvenience of investing and, you know, proving that you've done this investment and sort of proving that over the decade that you need to.
Right. And with the first one, is it a requirement to stay in the country the first 2 years, or what are the requirements there?
Yeah, so in regards to the temporary residency, those first 2 years, there's no minimum time in country requirements. So effectively, if you wanted to, you could come to Asuncion, grab your residency, and then return in 2 years if you wanted to convert it to the permanent residency. Once you do have the permanent residency, the law states that it's a minimum of 1 day a year in country to maintain that residency. However, that said, we haven't heard many people really ever lose their residency for not meeting that.
Okay, well, it does sound simple enough, considering some other countries and how difficult they can be. And now, besides learning the language, what is the best way that anyone can prepare to move to Paraguay? Because things are just a lot different here.
Yeah.
What's the best setup to prepare for success in Paraguay? And what are some pitfalls that they should maybe be ready for?
Yeah, so for me, the thing that can be a little bit frustrating with Paraguay sometimes is the banking system, right?
Right.
So I understand you're from Canada, I'm from Australia. We're used to banks just working. You know, someone sends you some money, you get it almost immediately, no questions, you go about your life. The apps work fine, the websites work fine. Paraguay is a little bit more archaic in the banking system. First, the apps are a little bit clunky, but more importantly, they have a lot stricter requirements here in regards to, you know, where the money's coming from, who are you sending the money to, that sort of thing. So more specifically, with most Paraguayan banks, if you put more than the equivalent of $1,000 into a bank account per month, someone's going to call you up or send you an email. Can you prove where this money came from, right? And, you know, that's fine, but it's just another sort of burden. You know, you have to get your invoice, or you have to get your pay stub, or you have to get your share investment thing, whatever it is, right? And so what I always recommend for clients, if they can, is actually maintain banking in another country, right? And I know that's not always easy. So for example, as a Canadian person, and just like an Australian person, for us to leave sort of our tax residency and sort of cut ties with our home country, we can't use the banking there in those countries anymore. So it's good to get banking in another third country that's not the country you're leaving and not Paraguay, and set that up. You'll find you have a much easier time going forward. Now, accounts like TransferWise or Revolut are really good options for people to do that. So that would be the first thing. The second thing I would say is mindset, right? Like what I tell people, Paraguay is kind of like going back to the 90s in a way, like in many good ways, but in many, you know, ways that we're probably not used to. So people have a different time sensitivity here. Like in the West, usually if someone says, you know, we're going to meet at 5, they're going to meet at 5, right? Whereas in Paraguay, it's not quite like that. You'll usually sort of be waiting longer for little things to resolve, little services. And that's just part of the culture here. You know, like we really benefit from people being laid back and friendly, and not particularly in a rush or stressed. But then, you know, when we need something done fast, you know, that doesn't always happen. What would I say? I mean, it's really, I find with Paraguay, it's quite easy to move here in terms of it's pretty safe, comfortable country. Now, obviously you mentioned Spanish, which I'd say is the #1 thing. I know people who have lived here 5 years and they can't even speak Spanish. I'm not recommending that, but it is possible to live here that long. But obviously you want to invest in your Spanish. But yeah, I guess the other thing that I think is important for anyone moving here is really invest in your relationships and making friends when you get here. Yeah, because lots of us, we're completely leaving our social circle, our support networks in our home country. I think it's really important to investing that when you move to a new country. So one really good way people can do that is really, you know, reach out to other expats or go to expat meetups and just surround yourself in other expats and other people that have lived here a long time. And then obviously when you know Spanish, obviously make relationships and have local friends as well.
Yeah, and I can relate to all of that. It is so different, but yet the laid backness of it, just, I love it. Like, I'm home.
Yeah.
So the #6, when immigrating to some countries like Canada, for instance, I know that when you come from some countries like Germany, I know some people have tried going there from Germany, and it is, depending on kind of your background and who you are, it can be really difficult. Is there anything like that that is related to Paraguay, that whereas if you're from a certain country, it is just more difficult than if you're from another country?
Yeah, absolutely. So every country, for whatever reason, bias or whatever, they have certain passports they make life easier for, and certain passports they make life harder for, right? And what Paraguay does is, if you have visa-free access, or you can get what's called a visa on arrival to Paraguay, it's quite easy to come here. And once you're here, it's quite easy to start the residency process. However, if you come from a country that requires a visa, honestly, it's a lot more difficult. And it's fine once you're here and you have a visa to come to Paraguay, but the it's quite a task to get the visa to come to Paraguay in the first place. And the reason is this is if you actually look at the visa requirements for Paraguay, you know, it says stuff like you need an invitation from, say, a business or someone to actually inviting you to come to Paraguay. And you need to, you know, provide bank records, and you need to provide previous visa history. It's this whole long list of requirements. It's quite arduous. So what I recommend for people who are interested in Paraguay is you can just go on Google. You can type in, you know, visa requirement for Paraguay in my country. I know Wikipedia has a list, and you can see all the countries that you can easily get a visa. And if your country isn't one of those, it's going to be a bit more difficult, honestly, for you to get a visa to come here. Generally speaking, most European developed countries can easily get a visa, but unfortunately some more other parts of the world, Africa, Middle East, parts of Asia, might struggle to get a visa to come here.
Okay, all right. That is very good to know. And I guess Google knows a lot of things these days, a lot of things we can put in. And so when it comes to what they should do, maybe before they even leave their country and move to Paraguay, and second, what do you recommend what they do when they get to Paraguay? What are some of those suggestions you have there for others?
Right. So yeah, so we mentioned really bank accounts. Oh, the other thing that's very important, right, is a lot of people move to Paraguay because they also want to take advantage of the more favorable taxes in Paraguay. Yeah. The thing is, though, every country has their own requirements for you to leave the tax residency of your country. Yeah. So just moving to Paraguay and saying I'm in Paraguay now doesn't mean that you're no longer have an obligation, say, to Canada or, in my case, Australia, right? So it's very important to research what you need to do to break what's called your tax residency, your obligation to pay taxes to the country you're leaving. And that's different for every country. Usually, like I said, it involves, you know, cutting ties, bank accounts, you know, all sorts of those little things where you're really proving to the country you're leaving, I'm not just some Canadian or Australian on holiday in Paraguay. This is my new home. This is where I pay taxes. I'm cutting my obligation to my home country. So I think that's very important. In regards to before you leave, it's almost like just do it, yeah, because you can spend 6 months researching and reading forums and all that, and which is great. But if you're going to do it, I think when you do it, you'll be like, I should have moved here 3 months earlier, you know, or like what's interesting, what I look at is I look at other like countries where expats have moved to, and like 2 years later, how many expats have said this country isn't for them and they've moved home. So I think I read, for example, in Panama, a country that has some similarities to Paraguay, after 2 years, roughly 50% of the people have decided Panama is not for them and they've returned to their home country. At least in my peer group in Paraguay, there's very few people that move to Paraguay, start living here, and they're like, you know what, I made a mistake, I'm moving back, right? So I think Paraguay has something really unique in regards to that, where people, when they move here, they like it and they stay. But let's talk about more your second question. What things can people do once they're here to set themselves up for success? There's something I think which is true, which is called the law of three, right? I heard it on a Mexican residency channel, and it basically goes like this. Anything that you used to be able to do in your home country, the first time you do it in Paraguay is probably going to take you 3 times as long, right? So, and that's for a number of reasons. You know, it's the language barrier, it's things just work differently here and all that. So all the basics of your life, I would sort of get set up, but also be patient as you wrap your head around it. So things like, obviously your banking, your insurance, but even like silly things like, I'm used to certain products you buy at the supermarket and certain products you buy at the pharmacy and all that. And just when you come here, like there's just a different way of doing everything, and just being open to that. I think it's good to take notes on sort of how you do things and also talk to other expats just so you can really, set your life up and get it going. The other thing that I would say as well is one thing that is very different in Paraguay is probably the driving. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I actually did a video last week on what's different about Paraguay, and driving is number one. It is crazy. Like I almost had to learn how to drive again.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think coming from the West, we're sort of used to, like, if I'm a pedestrian and I just step onto the road, I could be stepping, a car's going to make way for me, like cars in the West generally have a lot of respect for pedestrians. Here, it's almost like a pedestrian doesn't exist, So I think it's important to get used to crossing the road, being a pedestrian, driving in general, and just understand they have a completely different culture of driving here, and
Yeah.
maybe ease yourself into that if you're not used to that.
Yeah, and motorcycles. There's motorcycles everywhere, and you just have to look out. You have to be aware of yourself and everybody else, but you still have to go.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah. Me personally, I don't drive here. I find like Ubers and Bolts are just so cheap here that I sort of live in the city a little bit. I don't really need it. But if you are going to drive, maybe start easy, start slowly, invest in some driving lessons, that sort of thing. I think that's really it, to be honest. Yeah, it's like, again, just draw from the knowledge of, websites like yourself, services like mine, and yeah, in 6 months, a year, you'll be living like a local.
Yeah, and the people are very patient. So I wouldn't be concerned about whether or not people's patience is going to run out with you. Like the Hispanics, like they have patience till who knows how long to deal with you. And I've encountered that myself lately. So
yeah, absolutely. Like I find what's so nice about Paraguay as an expat is traditionally very few expats move to Paraguay, right? So, I remember when I first moved here, people would be like, wow, you've come to Paraguay. That's so interesting. I don't hear of many expats moving here. Like, what are you doing in Paraguay? What interests you about Paraguay? Like, they're so proud that people from another country have chosen to come and set up a life in their country, and I really appreciated that. Whereas I feel like in other parts of Latin America, it's almost the opposite, where there's just so many expats in different areas that the local people are they're fed up with them. Yeah, they don't want any more expats. Whereas here in Paraguay, it's the opposite. They're welcoming, and they're, like you said, they're very patient with people that decide to move.
yeah, absolutely. All right. Besides one personal question that I have for you yet, do you also assist with the repatriation?
Repatriation. So
like my husband and myself, we were Paraguayans. So we had the right, and that gives our kids the right. Now we need to home our kids here. And we've had tremendous back and forth, like you wouldn't believe, because we decided to go it on our own instead of hiring a lawyer outright because we had the time back then, but now we don't have the same time anymore. And we just couldn't get it through.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Honestly, that would be the first time. I mean, you're obviously a very interesting story, someone who's born in Paraguay and left.
Yeah.
The lawyer we use, she's been doing this stuff for 15 years. And B, we haven't done repatriation yet. So I assume they're not already Paraguayan citizens, your children?
No, we need to get them, like they have the repatriation form, like we got a form that says these children do have the right because of their father and then their citizen number. And that was supposed to get us to the citizen part of it. But now we get bumped around back and forth from the national police to the cédula office itself we are now supposed to have one original birth certificate from my husband's for each of the children. And it is just one office wants one thing and they send you to another one, they want something else, they send you either back to or to a completely different place. Like,
Right.
and everyone has the same list of requirements, except everywhere we go, their list has one additional step.
Oh, right. Okay. I mean, you're brave for doing a bureaucratic sort of administrative process in Paraguay on your own. So I respect that. I think usually in Paraguay, it's good to have sort of a lawyer or someone who's already has, you know, relationships in those areas to sort of move things along. Yeah, if you try and do something yourself, that's common. I hear that a lot, even when people try and do the residency themselves, you know, like rather than taking 2 or 3 months, it can take 6 or 8 months because it's just how the government works here sometimes. They don't always like just really take responsibility necessarily and sort of solve it. They kind of pass you around. So I'm sorry to hear that's happening for you.
Yeah, oh, it's totally fine. We honestly somewhat expected that. We'll get it figured out, and yeah, maybe you can pass me your lawyer's information, see if they can help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. And we're gonna cut that off there. Thank you for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you
You
inviting
bet.
me on.